What's the worst decision you've ever made? Think about it. I've made some real whoppers in my time. How much did it cost you? How much bigger would your bank balance be right now if you got it right? Maybe it didn't cost you. Maybe it cost someone else. Maybe it's still costing. Think back. How were you feeling at the time? Were you under pressure to get it right? Have you been under pressure for some time on multiple fronts? Could it be that the stress you were under led you to make a bad decision? More importantly, will it happen again? That's what I've been researching. How to make sure it won't happen again. How to not make bad decisions under stress. And that's what I'd like to share with you tonight. Let's start with some examples of what hopefully we can all agree are intuitively bad decisions. Diving into water without knowing how deep it is. Sleeping with your best friend's wife or husband. Speeding, driving dangerously. What's the worst that can happen? How much is it going to cost you? What's the risk? And what's the best that can happen? Is it going to make you rich? What's the reward? We're not psychic. We don't know how every decision is going to turn out. But we can proactively define a bad decision where the perceived risk is far higher than the perceived reward. Now, maybe I've created some stress amongst you. Let's see what the scientists say about how that stress can affect your decision making. Walden University, or in Columbia in the USA, they have a master's in clinical health counseling. And they say there are a number of ways that stress can negatively affect your decision making. The first is about new or novel decisions you're presented with them. In 2012, they did a study where they had two groups who did a series of decision-making tasks, new or novel type decisions. The one group were under a lot of stress. They were about to write an unrelated exam. And when they were given the decision-making tasks, they tended to fall back on habitual decision-making, use already established rules of thumbs to make their decisions. The second group were not under the same stress in terms of exams or anything. And when they were given the decision-making tasks, they were much more able to engage with the actual specifics of the tasks and come up with new or novel decisions. The researchers concluded that under stress, we tend to resort to habitual decision-making because it's less cognitively demanding. Another finding from Walden is that under stress, our brain chemistry can actually change, and that in itself can cause us to make bad decisions. When you're first faced with a stressful situation, you go into what's called a positive stress state. Blood flow increases to your brain, you get more oxygen, your cognitive function increases, you make good decisions. But if that stress isn't managed or that anxiety is prolonged, you can enter what's called a negative stress state or a toxic stress state. The blood flow decreases to your brain, oxygen decreases to your brain, your cognitive function deteriorates, your brain goes into a chaotic state. It cannot access the information it needs to make logical decisions. Basically, a recipe for decision-making disasters. So from what I've said, you can see that stress can affect our decision-making negatively. The next question is, are we stressed? Every year, Gallup do a poll in the workplace. It's called the Global Workplace Survey. And some of the results of that poll I found quite surprising. It's a US poll, but I think the figures apply equally in South Africa. They say over 80% of people said they were stressed in the workplace. and over half of those said they needed help with coping. 25% said they wanted to scream or shout in the workplace because of the stress they were under. And ominously, 10% said they feared violence from a co-worker who was under a lot of stress. And 14% said they felt like slapping or hitting a co-worker because they were stressed out, but they didn't. So from what I've shared with you, you can see there is a lot of stress around. What's much harder is to put a number on what that stress is costing us. In 2017, Stats SA did a study on presenteeism. Now, presenteeism is a concept in the workplace. Discovery defined it as basically being at work, but because of some health complaint, not being able to be as productive or deliver the quality that you would normally deliver. In this 2017 study, they put the cost of presenteeism in South Africa at 89 billion rand. More recently, experts are talking about a number closer to 200 billion rand. So, from what I've shared with you, you can understand that everyone is under a lot of stress. It is having a negative impact on our decision making, and it is costing us dearly. I also shared with you some examples of what would be called intuitively bad decisions. I'm sure you come up with plenty of examples yourself. Understanding how stress impacts our decision making and taking actions to combat that is just part of the story. The other part of the story is mitigating the stress itself. I found some interesting research on that, and that's something I'll share with you at a future date.